And there. We're live. Alright, guys. We're going to be recording an episode here where, for our Monday Mutterings, we are going to discuss, the fallacy of the need, not only of the need, but of the purpose of sensitivity writers in recent years in fiction. And even in some historical documents more recently. Because revisionist history is a stupid thing with some...
Oh, yeah, I remember the imbroglio over Dr. Seuss.
And that's not even history. I'm talking about, like, when you come to that whole, what was it called? The Woman King, I think?
Oh, geez.
Oh, yeah, the Dahomey Amazons. Which,
just straight up revisionist history. But let's let you start. Get us opened up here, Josh.
Okay. Well, welcome to everybody. I'm going to be discussing this sensitive topic about cultural vandals that we also, they had different names throughout history, but various groups usually referred to them as propagandists, paper pushers, paper hangers, and a couple other things. And that with the recent issues such as Dr. Seuss, as Armchair had mentioned earlier, and Roald Dahl, which I believe was a publicity stunt by the publisher to sell more copies.
It's certainly looking like it, since right after that they walked it back and said they were going to continue releasing the classic versions. It does seem kind of like a stunt to just sell more of the classic versions.
Well, it does occur to me that after that flap came down with Dr. Seuss, they sold a ton of those specific books, so they might have decided to use it for evil, so to speak.
In the terms of some of these publishers, it may indeed be a grift where they're just taking advantage of these people to cause a panic and then sell more of their stuff. It's entirely possible. But we're talking about the sensitivity readers themselves.
Yep, the direct cultural vandals.
Yeah, those.
It's an interesting concept when you think about what they really do to art. There are people who don't believe, or more importantly, who see a profit in basically destroying works that they cannot make themselves.
True.
And you're dealing with people who are continuously going to be grieved simply because that's the only way they keep their jobs.
Yeah. Well, they're literally paid to find things to be offended by. It's their entire fucking job. So, of course, they're going to find something no matter how tame the subject matter, or they cease to be relevant. But it's a sham in and of itself.
Yeah, it's a situation where you have people who literally pay their rent by, stirring up cultural controversies and, policing others. And, well, of course, when you have that kind of a market out there, of course, they are going to endlessly find new things to be offended over, because that's how they pay their rent and buy their groceries.
And let's be honest, a lot of them also just get a sick fucking kick out of it. Not all of them, but a fair number of them have proven themselves to be doing it because, it pays the bills, but also because they get off on telling other people how they have to do something.
Yeah, and generally people who have far more artistic merit than they ever would.
Yeah.
It's very easy to be a critic. Very easy to be a critic. Oh my god.
I've also found through looking for some of these people's profile, most of them are what we would refer to as failed artists. Yep. They're people who have either were trying to be writers, artists, actors, and they failed, and now they're basically going around destroying things. But since you both have written, and you have published works, and I believe both of you are also working on your next works.
He's already finished his second one.
Oh, okay. Well, you know what I'm saying. I think it's an interesting thing. How do you guys feel about the idea that in 10, 20, or even 60 years, somebody could take your work and alter it simply because of petty temporary issues?
Well, flat out, my opinion of it is the same as yours. At the point where I am going to, legitimately, we know I'm terminal, I'm going to die, I'm going to go out of my way to try to get my work put in the public domain so that it no longer fucking matters what they say, do, or think.
Okay.
That's my opinion, because I have no use for even the notion of some asshole going through my work and trying to make the very, very ham-fisted, very biased, and very ignorant assumption of how something I wrote is supposed to make people feel or what it's supposed to mean. It's meant, any work of fiction has a certain level where it's meant to be interpreted by the reader. Of course, that's the kind of the way fiction works. But at the same time, it's also meant to convey, it's also meant to build a world, to introduce you to characters, to endear you to characters.
Well, there is such a thing as the death of the author.
Yes, exactly. But at the same time, the story remains.
And I'd also say, to your point, that they've been trying to destroy H.P. Lovecraft, but they can't.
Yeah, because, and for exactly the reason why I want my shit to go public domains, because his work is in the public domain. So it doesn't belong to anybody. Nobody owns it. So none of this bullshit can be officiated in the way that they want.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, also, the way copyright laws work, it's going to be, I think, right now 70 and probably with developments probably something like 90 years after my death, to the point where somebody who I don't to the point where the copyright on my work will expire. So I'm not particularly worried about my work.
Is that just normal? Or is that just how you arranged it?
That's normal. That's I think the reason why H.P. Lovecraft's work is in the public domain now is because he wrote in the 1930s, and I suspect he wasn't exactly very happy on renewing his copyrights.
But I would actually want it in like some form of written documentation that upon my death, I want my work to go into the public domain just to avoid any fucking potential bullshit. But then again, given how quickly some of this shit is dying, I'm not even sure these assholes will have a job in 30 years.
No,
honestly, I think we will probably end up, at least I hope we end up looking, and I think there's reason to hope we'll look back on this period in our history as sort of a moral panic.
Yeah.
Rather than, I mean, because there were, back in the 80s, 90s, there were all kinds of panics over violent video games.
Violent video games, Dungeons and Dragons, all kinds of stupid shit.
Rock and roll music.
Yeah, the rock music scare.
Dancing back in the 1800s and beyond.
The evangelical lobby getting in on things, getting into almost everything in the 80s.
Even religious families, who weren't the most devout practitioners, according to other religious people, used to call them Bible thumpers.
Yeah. Well, they had incredible influence in the government, too. I mean, the Reagan administration was deeply in bed with these people.
Yeah, it was all the same stupid shit, just different reasons. Go ahead, bro.
And I'll add my 2 cents on that before we move on to the next element of it.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I always said that I was going to make sure that upon my death, everything I created was injected in the, oh Lord, I just completely spaced it.
Public domain.
Public domain is simply because I want it to be immortal, and I don't trust my own children. Because we've watched what has happened with, like, Lord of the Rings or Dune, where the family members are more interested in whoring those things out and care very little for the for what they have inherited. They don't
in a more recent example, and an example I have personal involvement with, was Gene Roddenberry's son. How quickly and eagerly he sold that to the lowest common denominator with no care of what they did with it, because he had no connection or respect for his father's legacy. He just wanted to cash in on it as fast as possible.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you can, and I mean, just to go back to the point about the Tolkien estate, Tolkien was like the fact that the Lord of the Rings is what it is because of Christopher Tolkien.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's gone downhill in a hurry recently is because of
the grandchildren.
His kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just because you have kids who might be on board doesn't mean the grandkids are going to be on board.
Exactly. You don't know what the future comes. But there's also another element to it for me.
Go ahead.
And it was the idea is that if I made something, I would want other people to be able to do things with it to keep it alive. And so that those actual talented individuals, their stuff will rise to the top.
Yeah,
all
that
the
makes
crap
sense.
people are going to write about with my stuff anyways will fall away and be
Well,
forgotten.
because at the point you do that, the stuff has to be judged on its own merits because there's no authority to say what is and isn't better or true. It's up to the reader at that point.
The other thing is that it removes the estate being able to go, oh, we decided to change that. No, this work exists in this form. You can do anything you want with it.
That's what I mean. It's like there's no
form.
quote-unquote authority, i.e. the estate, to say, well, you know, you might like this better, but it's not really considered to be this author's work.
Well,
because we say what that is. Kind of
It
bullshit.
removes the pen of the propagandist, I guess is one way to put it.
That's not a bad way to put it.
I would also I'd like to say all this. All right,
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, did you want to add something else? Go for it.
Please do.
Oh, I mean, I was just going to say, I mean, we saw this with I mentioned this earlier, we saw this with the Dr. Seuss estate, where the people who control that, who, you know, own the copyrights, because Dr. Seuss is not, to my knowledge, public domain yet. They can go around and do Orwellian changes to his works and, like, take them out of circulation, and take some pretty extreme measures to take them out of circulation. Because... Again, it's his estate that actually ended up owning the copyright, and that's controlled by people with certain opinions these days.
And if you look at some things about Roald Dahl, and I'm not going to try to do the direct quote, but basically, to somewhat paraphrase, he was quoted as having the opinion of, if he found people plagiarizing, propagandizing, or trying to quote-unquote clean up his books for political reasons, he would find reason to feed them to his crocodile.
That's pretty bad, still being honest.
Okay. Well,
not to mention, I mean, God, what would be politically controversial in Roald Dahl except for maybe if there's a very powerful witch lobby?
Well, if you look at the whole woke thing, it's all politics. Yeah. Nobody really gives a shit about it. It's all for financial and political gain. It's just a fucking game to keep these crazies on board with the voting base. Or on board to buy the next product. That's Disney's game. They don't give a shit about none of this. It's just profitable right now for them.
I mean, I wouldn't even say it's the voting base, because this stuff doesn't get votes. You all know the old saying, get woke, go broke.
Well, I'm talking about in terms of the political players.
Yeah,
because they farm these people for votes in certain places, and you know what places. I don't even need to say them.
It's not the real voting base. It's to keep them on board with the establishment and the
well, sure, but then they become a voting base because they vote for the establishment.
Yeah, I understand.
I definitely say that one of the big problems with that element is that whenever you pander to a very small group of people, it will give you temporary profit, but it will always burn you in the end, because you burn out and push away so many people that you find yourself very isolated. That's why we see Disney getting closer and closer and closer to the element that they might have to actually start selling off IP.
Well, then we see all the problems with Hasbro, with all the changes they've allowed the hacks at Wizards of the Coast to make to Magic and D&D and all the customer hostile bullshit.
The same thing that happened to Wizards of the Coast is what happened to Disney about 10 years ago. It is the ideologues that got into the company who don't care about the money.
Yep.
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, I think you can blame social media for this, because just like the internet allows.
Well, it's certainly responsible for the escalation of it.
Well, because just like the internet allows, very fringe groups to organize, even if they're being utterly alone and normal without the internet.
Yeah.
You can find a community for anything on the internet.
Well, and the thing is, like, people have been saying for years and are still saying now, and honestly they're trying to drive it more home now because of how weak these groups are getting. There's not nearly as many of them as there seems to be.
Yeah. Well, yeah. This is the key thing to remember is, just as the internet allows fringe groups to organize, it also allows fringe groups to use that organization to pressure large companies. They've done analyses of like Twitter campaigns that resulted in large companies like corporations on the top 500 list, changing policies and making major decisions. There was like 20 people on Twitter.
Although I do find something funnier about that is how much that's started to decline, because the companies have started realizing that despite what they thought, this does nothing for their bottom line.
Yeah, well, it's because they're realizing their market research people who are telling them to do stuff are completely full of shit.
And here's the issue with the whole sensitivity reader thing. Apart from the blatant fucking ingenuousness of it, you know, the grift is blatant if you pay any attention, because they're literally just paid to bitch and moan and change anything they don't like.
Well,
so they get to push their ideology and get paid for it.
Well, let me
go ahead.
Let me move it on to something that's tangentially connected to it. Now, I'm going to make an observation, and you guys can then comment off it.
Okay.
My observation is this: I lived in both West and East Germany during the time period of that. One of the things I can tell you is that when I saw sensitivity writers first pop up, the first thing I thought was, oh, this is the propagandists. These are the people who go around and they look for things to be angry about, and they cause a scene because it's the last step before the system breaks, where they start trying to induce fear into people and try to police how they talk and how they communicate and what they can gather around, trying to change the language. And I think that for this fad that's been going on with woke, this is like its last stage. This is its desperate play to inflict damage on things and get as much done that they politically aligns with their will. And it doesn't have to be like some kind of giant scheme. It's just giving these people a worldview and then letting them out into the public. So for me, I think this is a last bit of the woke before it really starts losing most of its power. What do you guys think?
Probably. We have been seeing kind of a steady decline in it, and I usually try to stay out of this kind of political bullshit because politics make my fucking blood pressure raise.
Well, you can't stay away from politics and sensitivity readers.
No, but that's the only reason I say that, because I brought this up because even with the politics not considered, it's just an obnoxious practice. It's an obvious grift, and the fact that you can see them trying to double down on it so hard lately, when so much of the, you know, call it what you want, woke or SJW or whatever, programming and fiction is failing so routinely, does kind of make it seem like they're just trying to shove as much of it out as possible before they either get ousted or stop getting hired. Now, I'm no expert on this shit, but it's how it seems.
Well, I mean, we've seen this with a number of companies recently where new ownership came in, they got bought out. Twitter's one of them. And new ownership came in, and then the in-house woke enforcers all got shut at the door immediately, and performance improved. So I think there's certainly an element of that there's these people have sort of gotten themselves into positions of power. Now they're trying to stay in positions of power. And despite the fact they're not producing results for the organizations they've parasitically latched onto, and they're not value added in the slightest.
And a lot of the organizations have started to fucking notice this, as we've seen.
Well, I would add to that and say, to me, the reason I said I thought it was the part of the last stages of this fad is I feel like it's the last stage of a company trying to appease this mob before they turn on them.
I think to some extent some of them already have, so I don't know. It may be a foregone conclusion, but it doesn't mean they're smart enough to realize it. Because some of these corps are so out of fucking touch, it's like they're years behind everybody else.
Well, yeah,
it's like talking about Disney, more. I mean, Disney is such a large organization. It's going to take a long time to fall apart.
Yeah,
and there also has a lot of opportunities to right the ship, so to speak.
And just mentioning to support that, just using Disney as an example, you have to think also that Disney has most of its projects planned 5 to 10 years ahead of time.
Yeah, which is how Iger's been able to pull the bullshit he has.
It takes a long time for a lot of this stuff to work through the system before they can usually course correct too much.
Yeah.
especially with a giant company like Disney. But please go on.
Were you?
Go ahead, man.
I mean, I was just. I mean, I guess I kind of finished my thought there.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean.
Okay.
I mean, I think I think a lot of so much of this stuff is honestly just a way for, it's just a way for people to grift into people who don't produce value added. Like you mentioned earlier, a lot of these people are failed creatives.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy to fail as a creative, and there's a lot of people who go out there and claim they're creatives, who are bad at what they do.
Well, and I mean, a lot of people, to be fair, and it's purely opinion-based before you tell my wife and she yells at me, but a lot of people would call us that, because we're small-timers, we've only done one or two things, and they would call us fake or, unsuccessful creators. But I feel like there's a difference. Like, yeah, okay, you did something, it made money, sure, whatever. But if there's nothing to it, I can call you a fucking successful fucking writer, I guess, but I'm not sure if I can call you a creative.
Well, here's the thing: there's very little, and this is my experiences. There's very, very little necessary connection between financial success as a creative and things like having talent. I realize this sounds a little bit of a cope, but. Both you and I are independent authors, but there are plenty of there are plenty of people who get huge publishing deals who I know for a fact are much worse writers than you are, and they get publishing deals because they basically have better connections inside of the
They've
industry.
got a name, or they know somebody, or they had an in with the publisher. God only knows what all it's got.
It's such a there's this huge element of hustle as far as. Hustle and connections as far as getting into, getting published and getting sort of made as a writer.
That's why it's so difficult to be an independent fucking writer who self-publishes, because you don't have those advertising resources. You don't have all that word of mouth built in.
Yeah, it's a huge hustle as far as building yourself as an indie writer.
So you can be very creative and still not get the credit because you just don't have the advertisement fucking capability. So getting people to actually give a shit about what you've written, regardless how creative it might be, is really fucking difficult. And then you have hacks like these getting paid to alter pre-existing work that they didn't even have the creativity to write to begin with. It's pretty fucking irritating. Because they don't actually have any creativity. They just go in, look for something that they can claim is racist or phobic or what the fuck ever, and then they get paid to fuck up somebody else's work.
And they usually get paid fairly poorly.
But they're still getting paid, so that's the stupid part.
It's a social justice grift job, and I mean, those aren't generally very well paid, but they do get paid to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, like I was saying earlier, it's not. There are so many. I mean, God, for the longest time, for years, we were screaming into the void about terrible writing in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that you or I could have written a far better Star Wars sequel trilogy than the one that got written.
Plausibly, but you know what the difference is? I'd say immediately. You or I would not have pulled a Rian Johnson or J.J. Abrams and been like, well, I know everything, and I say this is how it goes. I would have been looking for research materials. I would have been looking for experienced pre-Disney Star Wars writers, lore writers, and getting every resource that was available to me to make it good. That's the most galling part, is these people had these resources and they actively just blew them off.
It's because for all these ostensible writers couldn't be bothered to read the Legends books.
Yeah.
Right. You're a writer, but not a reader somehow.
All right. Well, there are a lot of people who don't read anything.
Well, there was something you pointed out the other day that probably bears repeating. When it comes to guys like Alex Kurtzman, J.J. Abrams, and a few others we talked about, what they don't do.
They don't read their own stuff.
They don't read it. They don't watch it. And that's just the stuff they wrote.
Yeah, and it's because they're basically there to they're drawing a paycheck, right? They don't have any. They're maybe mercenaries is a bad word, but they don't give a damn about what they're doing. There's no passion.
They have no creative passion, and they take no pride in their creations. Because what they want to create is none of the things they work on, and what we've already seen with them is when they create stuff they care about, they fail. So that would definitely be one thing I'd say about Alex Kurtzman and his like. Okay, so as a final,
and I mean that's kind of how honestly the unfortunate part is that's kind of how Hollywood crushes people's souls. Because most writers for Hollywood are basically doing their punching their clock and getting their Colombian marching powders because they're writing stuff they don't give a damn about.
That's something that bothers me personally because, and I'm sure you had this same thing happen, but the minute the copyright got officiated for my fucking first book, I had fucking some publishing fucking companies contact me. I don't know if you actually ran into this.
No, I didn't.
I got emails from 3 different, for whatever fucking reason, I don't know why. About a week after my copyright went through for the Farvithia Chronicle, I got emails from about 3 different publishing places asking me if I was interested in discussing a publishing deal with them. But that's the thing. All this fuckery that I have been seeing for years just made me vehemently against the idea of letting anybody else fucking handle my IP in the early stages. Because I don't want anybody else with creative control over something I put this many fucking years of my time, effort, and my fucking creativity into. I've seen what happens when you fucking do that.
Yeah. Oh, and also, I mean, there's tons of publishing scams out there. There's
that too. Yeah.
A lot of vanity publishers out there which are basically just making money off of would-be authors.
Not to mention being able to get a hold of your IP.
Your IP, and I ain't having that bullshit. No fucking way.
But the last thing I would put in front of you guys is about sensitivity writers.
Yeah.
And it would be this. In 10 years from now, the year is 2033. I mean, 2033.
30. Gee, that's a little longer than you said.
I finally hit my mecca, but never mind. It's the year 2033. What do you think people by then will think of sensitivity writers touching a lot of these?
I think that if they have, and God willing, they have any inclination of what the original works were or what they represented or what was behind them, that they'll find it just as stupid or mystifying as we do.
So you don't think they'll be judging them from their Jetsons car?
Okay. I wouldn't think so, because here's the thing, and this is the thing that people who have never written something that they really put any of their heart and blood and sweat and tears into don't understand, is that there's something, even if it's not the best thing you've ever read, right, or the best thing anybody else has ever read, there's something to it when you have put everything you can into a work, even if it's not grammatically perfect or your editing program misses some shit or something. There's still something there, and you should be able to tell. It's like when you read something that Tolkien wrote, or that Peter Benchley wrote, or Lovecraft, even with his very kind of nihilistic outlook on things, there's still a passion there. There's more than just the creativity. It's knowing that somebody gave a fuck. It's the difference between any of that and like some of the later shit that Stephen King wrote. That was just literally just obviously phoning in a story he already wrote.
Yeah, it's the love, and you can tell when somebody loved what they were writing, because it really just comes out. And even if somebody isn't a very good writer, it comes out.
Alright, okay. So you guys think they're going to be looked in the same way as the religious individuals from the 80s?
I don't know
Yeah,
because
definitely more on the,
if they, I'll say if they have the context of the religious fucking, oh my god, think of the children bullshit from like the 80s, you know, when we fucking grew up. That if they have that context, they're bound to find similarities in that shit to what we're dealing with now. It's just a different group of grifters doing it for a different fucking reason. But it's the same basic shit.
Well, we'll probably be deep into the conflict with the mall ninjas by then, so people won't even know.
I mean, like, say what you want about, you know, thinking what you think of Harry Potter, but the outrage and the scares and all the fucking fear tactics bullshit, it was just a repeat of the 80s D&D fucking scare.
You know, to comment on that, as someone who was involved in some of the tabletop industry,
yeah, both of us.
I will say this: it was. I'm not going to use the video games, not so much D&D and all that.
All right.
It was around the time the video game rating thing came into thing, and the funny part was, the people who led the charge for that were Democrats.
Of course they were.
Like Hillary Clinton and so on.
Yeah, and anybody who lived through it or knew knows exactly who it was. But they always try to sell it like it was. Oh yeah, it was the Republicans that did all that.
But
they helped.
At the time when that happened, it was kind of what I would consider one of the last real gasps of that kind of, oh my god, think of the children movement that had been plaguing people in basically nerd hobbies since the 80s. It's when they really just finally started to kind of lose their power, grip, like influence over that market. And I think that in a similar manner, the Hogwarts Legacy thing kind of shows just how little influence these different groups have. And I think it's actually what sparked a lot of these companies to start trying slowly to turn against these kind of people.
One would fucking hope.
Yeah. I think it's kind of it shows how powerless they are, and then also shows just how tiny of a group of people they are. Just like it did in the 90s when they're like, oh my god, Mortal Kombat will have you like fatality in your neighbor.
Yeah, because playing a game of Mortal Kombat is totally going to make you capable of ripping somebody's spine out of their fucking body. You know?
They got their rating system, and the world didn't change.
Nope, nothing changed.
In that manner, I think it's very similar, is that we're seeing the sensitivity writers rise to air quote prominence because they had their Waterloo, in a way, with Hogwarts Legacy. The companies are starting to turn against them, and for some companies, I think hiring the sensitivity writers is a way for them to test it, see if that market is a thing, and it's the first time they're really trying to test it instead of just believing their marketing team. That's my opinion.
It's possible. I mean, shit.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think to your point there, we noticed that the Bible thumper lobby got had a lot of successes, and then it kind of died right afterwards.
Yeah,
they were very hard dead by the early 2000s, and I think we're probably in the similar stage of the point where the woke lobby is becoming very successful and it's generating a genuine backlash that is quite happy at calling these people out for the nihilistic clowns they are.
Yeah. And it's the thing too.
Nihilistic in many ways, deeply sick, and deeply sick in many ways, deeply dangerous people they are.
And before we wrap this up, the one other thing I'll say is they're proving the danger of introducing something like this to begin with to this kind of industry. This fucking hard push for these sensitivity readers has done exactly what was going to be the worst thing they could ever do. It's pissed off the general public because they inevitably started fucking with things that weren't just nerd culture or pop culture, things. These were culture that some just regular Joes grew up with. Things like fucking Willy Wonka and a Chocolate Factory, Dr. Seuss, You know, this kind of shit that anybody might have read growing up as a kid. And now you're pissing off people who were staying the fuck out of it prior to this. But the more you fuck with this, the more people you actually make angry to turn on these ideas.
Oh, it reminds me of a horror movie truth. And the horror movie truth was this: never unmask your villain.
Well, yeah.
Because it undermines them.
True.
And once you've done it, all mystery, all of everything goes out the door. It's done, and then everything after that is never going to recapture that feeling.
No.
And I think that's kind of where we are. This industry has unmasked itself, and right now a lot of these companies are starting to try to move the other way because they realized they've created. They've spurred people into going off and creating their own things, starting their own companies.
Yep,
because they don't trust them.
The OGL stunt kind of proved it to a lot of people when the juggernaut fucking D&D started actually getting legitimate backlash that was hurting their actual earnings. And it was hurting their reputation so much that people literally gave it up. They found other things to do or they did their own thing.
Well, talking of sensitivity writers, D&D has been plagued with them
for
about 5-6 years now.
At least. I think maybe 7 or 8.
Like what they did to Ravenloft is shameful.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What they've done to Ravenloft, their refusal to touch Dark Sun because of all the quote-unquote problematic content, their bastardization of Spelljammer, all the older stuff in AD&D and going forward that was popular, they refused to touch it or they forcibly twist it until it's unrecognizable. And people didn't like that. And the more they did it, the more people noticed.
All right. Well,
yeah, and I mean, the thing is that, I mean, a lot of this nerd culture stuff isn't really... I mean, you say it's a subset, but you say it's a relatively niche thing, but it's not. A lot of this stuff is quite mainstream.
As time is
definitely bigger than when I was younger.
Yeah, I'll say when we were kids, it wasn't near like this, but
well, it's because of the generational churn.
Exactly.
Now it's becoming more common and more of a popular thing.
Yeah.
But I think we definitely covered a good chunk about that. Hopefully, people enjoyed it. But I'd also hold on, people. I'd like to give you guys both a bit of talking about what you're working on as a bit of what do they call it, a white pill for people. Be like, hey, look, I know we've lost a lot of things: Star Trek, Star Wars, Marvel Comics.
And here's one thing before we get into that, I want to drive this home. Just personal opinion on this: the new stuff may be shit, the future may be very much in doubt or just finished, but we've never lost it. Like, if you love this shit, then go back and read the old stuff. Watch the old fucking movies. Watch the Clone Wars if you like Star Wars. Watch old Star Trek. The shit's still out there. There's tons of it. Just find it and enjoy it and ignore this new shit. You ain't got to give it up completely.
I'll also say this. You're never going to live in an era that has had more ways of getting things out to people creatively than today.
That's
because
true.
There used to be a thing like when I was trying to break into some of this stuff, we would print books out on a plain white piece of paper, fold it in the middle, staple it, and we call them zines. For like 25 cents each, just because you wanted to get your name out.
Yep.
But do not let people say that you can't get out there. There is a ton of ways to get your books out, to get attention to them. Just go out and be creative.
Just be prepared for it. Don't let shit fuck you over. Be prepared for it to be difficult. Because writing is difficult enough, but then getting people to notice it or to give a shit, it's tough. But don't completely give up on it. I mean, I'm still fighting that shit. And there are days where I'm like, fuck, nobody cares. But I'm still doing it. Because eventually, all I can do is keep trying it. And it's still something I strongly feel is better than a lot of the multi-million dollar backed fucking fiction I've seen recently. I actually do believe that. I may not have an army of editors to fix every, like, tiny little grammatical error where I, like, stumbled on the fucking, like, keyboard and didn't catch it in my month of editing. But it's still good. It's still there, and a slight mistake on anybody's part doesn't change the context or the content.
Nothing's worth doing without struggle.
Yeah, that's another good way to look at it.
All right, Bill, let's cover what you both have in the works for everybody.
You first. Especially since you've got the Discord that actually pays attention to your writing. I don't have that.
I mean, I'd say that they pay some attention to my writing, but I've published 2 novels so far. I published The Maiden's War back in 2019 and the sequel Valkyrie Night in 2022. I'm working on the 3rd book, and there's plans for a 4th at some point. It's been well received. I've actually been getting fan mail recently, which is kind of surprising.
And
so it's a sort of a military fantasy series on kind of the exact. Basically, I sort of sat down and thought, well, what would be the exact kind of thing that I would have liked to read when I was younger? What would be the kind of book that I would have loved? And so it's what I came up with.
You seem to have succeeded at it because you have definitively more of an audience than I do.
I mean, I guess I
legitimately don't know what I've done wrong, but I just I don't generate the same kind of interest.
Honestly, we can talk later about that. I've got a few things I do that kind of generate interest. But
all right.
Which don't need to have some big social media presence to do. You just kind of need to. It's just kind of I do a few things.
I don't know. I kicked up a fucking Twitter, but I don't know exactly how to advertise on it.
Well, that's great. So it's like a historical fantasy setting, and I believe it's something kind of like a fantasy version of like World War I, right?
Yeah.
All right, cool. And there's Sephiroth in it. I'm joking.
No. There is a long-haired asshole in it, though.
Yeah.
Wink, wink, ladies and gentlemen. Check that out.
Come hither, ladies.
As you can tell, I have read his book. I don't know if he ever finished reading mine.
Look at my kitana and long hair. All right, and Farv. You work on the next book to your series.
Yeah, my first one is out, and I'm really bad at this shit. Like, I'm good at writing it. I'm bad at fucking promoting it.
I've heard song and tell that it was inspired by a D&D game you had.
Yeah, well, you were there for it. Yeah, so we were big tabletop gamers, and a friend of mine helped me sketch out a family of literal, like, centaurs. But they were centaurs, not like the weird, brutish crap you see in, like, some MMOs and fantasy, or, like, the whole Grecian thing. They're kind of like, they're a whole culture. Knights, scholars, soldiers. And so I had this array of different centaur characters, and I played all 4 of them at different times in this campaign, along with this werewolf hunter guy, and eventually, when after about 3 years that campaign finally ended, Josh is like, you really should have, like, made a story out of this or something. And my friend Amanda's like, yeah, actually, you should do that. And so I kind of started picking at it, and eventually, after about, we ought to say 3 years total.
Yeah.
About 3 years, I get this fucking thing written and prodded to get it sent to the copyright office and all that shit. Go through that, spend money on the cover artist, get the fucking thing published. It's a fantasy novel that I like. I don't go too tropey on it. I'm not trying to play off Tolkien. It's not absolutely brimming with elves or, any of that kind of stuff.
It's very
it's kind of a fresh take on a fantasy world. Actually, I mean, I left a review for you on it.
Yeah, I did see that, by the way.
It kind of reminded me of Shining Force, honestly, which I enjoyed a lot because I loved that series back in the day. It's kind of JRPG-esque, which is a nice touch.
So I've gone ahead with that, and now I'm working on the second book now. I'm about close to 200 pages into the new one of the first draft, and it's definitely picking up where the last one left off, but it's going further into some elements of the world and where, how some of the characters actually interact or are related to the world. So I'm not spoiling too much, but it's getting more in depth, and the plot is still going forward from where the last one ended. So I'm trying very hard to make sure things are consistent.
I will definitely support that. It does have a very Shining Force vibe, so if you're a fan of those underappreciated games, damn it, you should definitely give this a try, and the other series as well. Because, hey, you'll get the best of both worlds. You'll get historical fantasy and a new take on a more traditional style fantasy at the same time.
Fair enough, yeah.
And
yeah,
hey,
they're both new and fresh sort of fantasy stories that are deliver things which you don't see a lot of in, which deliver sort of things you don't see a lot of.
Or like in the case of my book, pushing actual fucking family values.
damn it, 1950s, why won't you die?
I mean actual family values, not overblown, exaggerated ones.
Damn it, Beaver, why don't you listen?
As we spend the entire show slagging the moral majority, and then we're like, and we also promote traditional family values in Christianity.
Oh no, I'm not going that route. There's like 4 different religions in my fucking book.
Excuse me while I get my rebellion suit and tie on.
Oh man, yeah. It's just,
I mean, you say that, but like Erling Goes to Church is a fairly common chapter in my.
That is true. It's honestly like Grayston is fairly devout in his beliefs, but the whole thing is like his belief system is much different from most people's because of the goddess that he is involved with.
And with that very Christian comment, let's let everybody go. And thank you for joining us for another Mutterings on the Mondays.
We appreciate it.
And hey, check these books out on Amazon because that's your Christian duty.
And I'll have a link to both the books when this gets released. So. See you later, everybody.
See you, everyone.